Good evening everyone and welcome to the State Library of Queensland. My name is Vicky McDonald and it's my great privilege to be the State Librarian and CEO of your State Library, the State Library of Queensland. Welcome also to our online viewers who are streaming through Facebook Live and via the State Library website. And it's fantastic to see so many people here tonight at the State Library for the last Queenslanders in Conversation in 2017. But let me begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay respects to their ancestors who came before them. State Library is located on Kurilpa Point, which is a traditional meeting, gathering and sharing place for Aboriginal people, and we proudly continue that tradition here at State Library every day of the year. I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome our event partner, ABC, in particular tonight's facilitator and ABC Radio Brisbane presenter, Kelly Higgins-Devine, and of course also our four panellists who will be sharing their insights and expertise with us this evening. Distinguished Professor Dietmar Huchmacher, Anne Livingston, Ben Slater and Dr. Ben Davis. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, welcome everyone. Tonight's event marks the final Queenslanders in Conversation in the Year of Digital Futures. Throughout 2017, State Library has been exploring how technology has given us new tools to question, to understand, imagine and improve the world in which we live. The Queenslanders in Conversation series has provided a platform for lively discussions on the massive changes occurring in our world through digital innovation, including theories into what kind of future this will create, the future of work and also smart cities. Tonight's conversation, however, will focus on how technology is merging with the human body and what we can expect to see in the future. The role technology plays in our lives is growing rapidly, and we are less willing to separate ourselves from our devices. This can be seen by the rise of wearable technologies, and I certainly would not have thought 10 years ago that millions of people would be wearing a watch that reads your emails, answers your calls, or that you could even have a 3D printed shin bone transplanted into your leg. But of course, all of those things are reality. But with these amazing advances comes some serious ethical, legal, privacy and social concerns, and these are the things that our panel will explore this evening. As with everything here at the State Library, Queenslanders in Conversation is designed to be a participatory event, so we encourage you to join in the conversation and share stories, insights and questions online using the hashtag #DigitalFutures. On-site guests are also welcome to join in the discussion, and Kelly will throw for the questions later in the evening. There will be a microphone at the bottom of each of the staircases, and we invite you to come down to the microphone to ask your question. If you're unable to get to the microphone, just raise your hand and one of our staff will come to you as well. If you didn't get the chance to have a look at our Digital Futures Lab on Level 2 prior to this evening's talk, we welcome you to do so afterwards. The space is a studio, game space and exhibition, and this evening we'll keep it open until 8 o'clock, so you can go in there on your way out. It's just adjacent to the lifts. If you would like some further information on State Library events or exhibitions, please have a chat to one of our staff following this evening's event or check out our website where you'll find all the details. So just a reminder though that this evening's event is being recorded and live streamed. So we've closed the doors here at the front. So if you need to leave, if you could exit through the doors at the back of the auditorium, and you can come back in via those doors as well. As I said at the beginning, we're very proud to be partnering with the ABC for tonight's Queenslanders in Conversation, and I'll hand over now to our facilitator for this evening, Kelly Higgins-Devine. Thank you.
So has everybody got their wearable tech? Yeah, there are a few of us, and there'll be more and more and more of us as the days, the weeks and the months go on, because the generations coming behind the initial wearers of these, they're going to see it as everyday tech. They don't look at the things that we go, wow. They're not wowed, they expect them now. And we're going to get into that this evening as well. We'll cast a wide net on technology. How is the digital world merging with the human body? How are assistive and wearable tech, how are they impacting on your day-to-day life, maybe in ways you don't even recognise? Assistive technologies, for example, have been used to improve the lives of the sick aged and disabled via robotic limbs, headsets to help people see, 3D printed organ replacements. And who hasn't seen those videos of people who are colourblind and they put the glasses on and all of a sudden the world of colour is there? Something so simple that most of us take for granted that makes such a difference to every one of them cries, and I cry with them. But is my love affair with my watch masking other security, privacy and health risks? We'll get into that tonight, and we'll talk about what you're seeing at the edges here as well. So please welcome your panellists for this evening. Dr. Beck Davis is a senior lecturer and higher degree research convener for the Queensland College of Art, Griffith University. Her work centres on the many ways designers collaborate and respond to complex problems, and on the role that wearable technology and embodied media plays in our designed future. Beck is currently Queensland President and a National Director of the Design Institute of Australia, and is on the Board of Directors of the Queensland Student Innovation and Entrepreneurs Alliance as part of the Gen In Shaping Queensland Entrepreneurs Project. Dr. Beck Davis. Distinguished Professor Dietmar Humacher, have I done that even in the ballpark? Thank you, is the Director of the Centre in Regenerative, I didn't do that well though, did I? Regenerative, thank you very much, Medicine, and Director of the Australian Research Council Centre in Additive Biomanufacturing at the Queensland University of Technology. He is among the pioneers in the field of 3D printing in biomaterials, tissue, engineering and regenerative medicine, having developed an outstanding track record in two new cutting-edge research areas, 3D in vitro cancer models and humanised animal models, let me turn the page, via the translation of tissue engineering technologies into cancer research. Please welcome Professor D. Anne Livingston combines over 35 years' experience in the community service sector with her passion for innovation and digital inclusion. Anne is the research and development lead for Australian-based company Community Resourcing. The company promotes and enhances global innovation in the community health and care sectors. Anne is passionate about helping the sector embrace the opportunities offered by technology, with the aim of using the power of digital technology to vastly improve the situation of people with disabilities, the aged and their carers. Anne Livingston. And finally tonight, Ben Slater, ad man and tech futurist, was one of the first Australians to be implanted with a microchip. With 20 years in the advertising and digital marketing world, Ben brings a commercial perspective to any discussion around the use, benefits and pitfalls of technology, both now and into the future. As a consumer pioneer in the use of smart home tech, through to co-developing RightMinder, the world's first fall detection application for smartwatches, Ben has a passion for the opportunities that tech and hyperconnectivity bring us. Ben Slater. This is a... Oh, am I good? No, if I turn it on. Yeah, this is what happens when I'm allowed to use tech. This is a really exciting panel because it speaks to each of us about what is possible in our futures. So if I can just start, because this is fascinating at each side. Dietmar, what are we looking at here? What's happening?
So we are looking at two 3D printers, which are printing on this side at the moment one of the chin bones. So maybe what you have seen about 3 weeks ago in the media, in collaboration with Dr. Michael Weggles, who is a plastic surgeon in the PA hospital, who had a patient who was missing more than 30 centimeters of his chin bone. So the patient had to consequence that either the surgeon had to amputate the lower leg or to go for this new treatment concept. And he decided that he wanted to go for this new treatment concept, which we have more than 10 years of experience in regenerating actually small bone defects, especially on the skull area. And based on this experience, we were then looking into this case, and I just pass this around in a second, where we use this scaffold, which is made out of a medical polymer. 1 kilogram of this polymer costs about $5,000. Very different from what you normally print on a printer where 1 kilogram costs you about $3. This is a biodegradable polymer. We have invested a lot of research to be able to 3D print this. But what also is very important, that we did print with one of the printers of Peter Bates, who is in the audience, who is the developer of the 3D printer, which is a Queensland, Brisbane-based company, to provide the surgeon with the model so he could do what we call a pre-operative planning. Because he had the visual information from the X-rays and the CT scan, but he had nothing which he could touch, where he could test things, because next to the scaffold, we also had to implant a nail, which would give the mechanical strength to allow the bone to grow into the scaffold. So I will pass this around and you can have a look.
So is this something we can expect to see more and more in surgeries and with bones that haven't grown or whatever may happen to us? I see you have 2 bosoms there.
Right. So the bone defects I mentioned before, and the skull bone and smaller defects, and this is another example I brought you. This is a skull bone of a young German child of 6 years. And this child had this bone defect here. This was a congenital defect, which means the child was born with a tiny defect, and as the skull was growing, the defect also became bigger and bigger. So the surgeons had 2 surgeries where they did try to transplant bone from another part of that child. The issue is that obviously, if you operate on a child, that the amount of bone you have is only little. And these 2 surgeries and this treatment failed. And therefore, the surgeons came to us and asked us if we could make, again, a scaffold, which is 3D printed, and is patient-specific. So what we do is, we can take now the images which comes from 3D X-rays, then we have commercial softwares which allow us to design a scaffold which exactly fits into the defect side, and I will pass this also around. And then from the engineering side, we add on some flanges, so because the scaffold needs to be fixed and so on. And then we combine this with what we call a growth factor. And the big advantage, of course, of this technology is, at the age of 6 years, the skull is still growing. So the normal treatment concept would be to put a titanium implant, which would work perfectly fine, except at the age of 9 or 10 years, the surgeons had to go in and to replace this with a bigger implant. So if you have now a biodegradable implant where the bone grows in, then you don't need the second operation. And based on all of this experience, which I have to say started out more than 20 years ago, when I was at the National University of Singapore, and I'm now 10 years at the Queensland University of Technology to start this regenerative medicine center, we have now a new project, and this has developed now in an area of breast tissue engineering. And what we do here is we apply the same principles that we use now, again, imaging based on laser scans, on magnetic resonance imaging, which allow us, again, to get a 3D image of the healthy breast for cancer patients which have a mastectomy. And that allows us then to model a scaffold which has a very specific shape. It's biodegradable again. But again, the scaffold is just one part of the piece. The other important part is the biology. And this is, again, a very large volume tissue which we have to regenerate. And therefore, what we do is, and that's, again, where the surgeons are so important in the concept, that we combine this with a technique where you take now fat tissue from another part of the body, which the surgeon does already for many years. And we place this inside the scaffold. So you might say, So what's the advantage? Why not just using the fat tissue? The problem is if the surgeon is just using the fat tissue, as it is very difficult to predict that remodeling, he might need to do this 4 or 6 times. With the scaffold, he only needs to do this 1 time. So we are at a stage now, again, after 4 to 5 years of research, that we want to start clinical trials next year. So this is another application of this technology.
I might need to just go back in the
Yes.
light for the webcast.
So I pass this also around.
I think I'd be needing a bigger scaffold if it was me, but that's just me. Professor, thank you for that. A round of applause, because that is amazing what you're seeing tonight. So Beck Davis, if I can go to you, when you're looking at that sort of design, what's coming to your mind when it comes to assistive sort of design and wearable technology, all these things?
I think it highlights the broad spectrum of wearables. When we start to hear the term and we hear of technology and we think of bodies and selves, this highlights the ways in which we can use technology to help augment and affect and improve otherwise perceived deficiencies. But it doesn't necessarily go into the other side of wearables, which is the more kind of digital side or the embeddedness of digital technologies within the wearable component.
So with that, how do Australian designs compare to what's around the world?
In terms of what we're doing in 3D printing, additive manufacturing, well, we're doing a lot of fantastic stuff in the additive manufacturing, 3D printing, advanced bio kind of area. Australia is doing some fantastic things at QUT, at Griffith, or at other institutions. There's a lot of work going into this space that's being recognised internationally. And I think that's the main thing with this technology. The fact that they're able to wheel in some 3D printers tonight shows how kind of adaptable or agile or scalable the technology is. So it gives us a chance to explore, experiment with different materials, different parts or different ways in which materiality is printed and used. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of experience and expertise in Australia.
What are some of those emerging technologies? Like, what would you be excited about telling our audience about tonight?
Oh, well, there's a host of different things. We've been speaking a fair bit with the panel tonight about different things in the lead up to now, but some of the kind of key trends around, say, virtual reality. I was talking earlier with Ben, and he'll elaborate more on that shortly, but yeah, virtual reality is probably one of the really big kind of key areas. It's a way of augmenting your experience in a particular environment, so whether you're using some sort of headpiece or lens to kind of engage in different environments, and that has an opportunity in the future to affect what's doing it now, but to affect physiological responses, so how you hear, see, smell, touch, and experience kind of otherwise virtual worlds. So I think that's one key area, but there are plenty that I guess we'll talk about tonight. But from a wearable point of view, the idea of haptics, embedding technology into our clothes, having kind of reactions and things, and allowing us to experience our world in different ways is probably one of the main sort of trends.
Well, how many people have tried virtual reality? Yeah? Did you enjoy it? Most, yeah.
There's a few heads being shaken as well.
Yeah, like, oh, no. Yeah. Well, virtual reality, I mean, to many of us, it's like, oh, isn't that what gamers do, you know? But what are the possibilities of virtual reality, Ben?
Oh, look, I think they open your eyes at the end of the day. I've got 3 kids, and Holly is our youngest. She's 3. She loves VR, you know, at 3. And it's amazing to see her experiences through the eyes of a 3-year-old in virtual reality. Then again, my father-in-law was in a VR world and leant on the edge of a ship's... that didn't work out so well. It wasn't there. But I think, like Beck said, it is really about just opening up the experiences to new things. You know, once you're in the virtual world, it is just absolutely incredible, and you don't know what it's like until you've been in there. And it is the start of things to come. Yeah.
Should we be worried about virtual reality in that, well, are we going to like it more than we actually like reality?
I don't think so. I spend a fair amount of time gaming in VR, and it's a social environment. And once you're in there, you feel like you are connected with the people globally. And it doesn't take much. It takes literally a couple of minutes to forget where you are. And at the moment, we're in a position where we're tethered. You're in a living room. We're not too far away from being untethered and being able to just you know, if we were in a virtual world at the moment, we could have an infinite number of people sitting there and engaging. You could be in a room by yourself watching a movie, or you could be watching the movie with 100 other people of your closest friends, or with the director, or whatever. So it's fun. It's entertainment at the end of the day.
Dietmar, where do you see the benefits of technology? Where do you see this going? What's coming for us?
Well, again, 3D printing has been now in industries like aerospace, automotive, really not just to make prototypes, but to make products. So, for example, the new turbines of the new Boeing are printed from a metal printer, right? So there are amazing developments. Other examples are in the automotive industry. Of course, there are now completely 3D printed cars, which is possible. So this becomes a technology which is used more and more by different industries. However, one of the very important aspects, and I'm fully with you, we have a lot of expertise in Australia in additive manufacturing and 3D printing. However, that is not translated yet into the educational side of our workforce. And that's something I'm very passionate about. So I'm a director of an Australian Research Council PhD training center in additive biomanufacturing, where we really train the next generation which will apply these technologies. And I think there is a short window for Australia, if we do the right investment in this area, that we will be leaders globally. And the advantage of this technology is that if we train this workforce, that is not easily replicated in low-wage countries. That is an investment which lasts us 20 or 30 years. So I think it's very important. However, as I said, there is now a window, and the question is, can we close this window from the educational side or not?
Okay, when you say that, can you expand on what you mean by that, like with education of the workforce? In what way and in what industries might we do this?
So obviously the overarching industry would be called advanced manufacturing, and then advanced manufacturing would be for aerospace, would be for automotive, even in the creative industries. I'm working with artists, right, which are implementing 3D printing into their artwork. So what I mean is, and often this word is overstretched, but 3D printing is a highly interdisciplinary area, right? And again, I want to bring the example of Peter, who you know, at a mature age went into this field, and he had to learn a lot of new things, not just about building a printer. It always looks very easy, you know, when you see people manipulating things on the computer, on the software, right? And everybody talks about open source, but it's not very simple. So the software side is very important, from the development, from using the software in the right way. So that's what I mean, is that we need to train the people which are not just high tech, but understand the printing side, and that means understand the material science, understand the hardware, understand the software.
Wow, Australia with the manufacturing industry again. It's kind of exciting, isn't it? Let's just go to wearable technologies and who they benefit the most. Anne, who do you see as the people who could benefit most from wearable tech?
I guess my passion is people who may be aged or have a disability, who engagement fully in life is able to be enhanced via technologies. And all the technologies mentioned already are making a significant impact, but things like, also things like exoskeletons, where mobility, it might have been a wheelchair all your life, and now you can stand and you can walk and you can navigate. And there's great advances in those sorts of technologies. And I guess it's for me about looking at some of the greatest issues in society and what we're facing in Queensland, issues of falls, a great burden on the health system and on individuals and their capacity to live life engaged or not, medication compliance, being able to live independently in your own home. And I guess the other issue around just basic social isolation, the role that technology can play in opening the parameters and opening the opportunities for people. And there's some great work happening in Queensland. I'll give a plug to my colleagues in Endeavour who are doing great work with virtual reality, have a virtual train station, have Brisbane virtually available to their clients to experience full life and in a safe and secure way. And I think it's those opportunities for Queenslanders that make technology a thing that should be embraced and should be considered.
We'll get to haves and have-nots in a moment. I can see you nodding, Ben, especially the technology to do with falls. You've designed something that can assist with that.
Yeah, so my business partner and I designed the world's first fall detection algorithm for smartwatches. And that came just simply from see a need, fill a need. And it was more about the isolation, like you mentioned, of people. We are as close to them we've ever been, but also further apart than we've ever been. You know, we constantly read stories about someone passing away in the house next door and not being found and all the rest, and yet, you know, we're all hyper-connected. You know, we've got friends and networks that are in the thousands, and yet technology has the ability to distance ourselves as well as bring ourselves together. So what we did with RightMinder was try and solve that to a certain extent, and it's exciting. And I think to your point about the elderly, our elderly generation, they welcome this with open arms. There's a sense that, you know, I'll get grandma a phone and she won't know how to use it. Lap that stuff up, you know? It really is. You only got to walk down the street and see, there's probably more wearables worn on people over the age of 60, 65, 70 than there is, you know, younger than that. And it's incredible to see.
Yeah. I think once they know you can't break it, it's all good.
Well, it's exactly right, yeah. And it's just getting easier and easier in that respect, yeah. Yeah.
And I suppose they were the people who were 30, 40 when all this began too.
Yep.
We kind of forget that they were, you know, they were part of that first wave that
Absolutely
came
right.
through with all this. But what about those who can't afford this sort of thing, Anne, or for whatever reason don't find themselves availing of all this tech that's available?
Kelly, it's a big issue. I'm a Queensland Digital Community Champion, and really I'm seeing firsthand the digital divide we've got in this state. And it's not necessarily just our rural and remote colleagues, but I'd certainly highlight the level of disadvantage that our colleagues around the state in more remote areas have. But people with a disability, people who are aged, are low uptakers of technology. And we're living in a digital world. We're having to interface with government agencies via technology. Yep. And if you can't, you won't, and you'll be disadvantaged. So we need to do a whole lot more around engaging appropriately. But we need to do also other things, and designers are getting better at this, as co-designing and co-creating technology with the very end users of technology, and also making it much more user-friendly and easier to engage with. And I think all of that stuff is happening, and it's happening quickly. And what we find in some of our work is that consumers are actually above, say, some of the health and care systems around with the range of technologies that they do have. So I guess it's also leads to digitally included workforces, and certainly in the area I work in, predominantly our workforce is women over the age of 46, depending on which stats you read, who haven't had the experience with digital inclusion, learn most of their lessons from their kids, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not adequate. So we should be doing much more to educate our workforce as well as educate and work alongside clients and individuals to get the technology right.
Yeah. Beck Davis, collaboration, people, designers, who are also people, of course, and most of them. You know, how is this working out? Are you finding that that's becoming key? Is how to design with what people want?
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important point. It comes back to that really front end. Who's creating, who's coding, who's making these technologies? So having an understanding of that broader sense of where is it going to be applied, who's going to use it, how they're going to use it, how might it be implemented, and then considering the broader consequences consequences of that as well. So who is included, who's excluded by design. So that comes back to the education component, not just in terms of how to understand how to use technologies, but the broader critical questions and ensuring our students of the future have the ability to, when they are future designers, manufacturers, makers, coders, entrepreneurs, whatever they might be, that they have the capacity to layer in a critical lens when they are engaging with technology, because it is advancing at a rapid rate. There is kind of general acceptance of tech, but how do we go about ensuring that those things that are created, that do exist, are done so in a way that they're inclusive?
Beck, what have you seen? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. This is a bit of a question without notice. Where you've gone, that is a clever bit of design. That is...
It's probably easier to say the things that aren't.
Okay.
So just leveraging...
Let's go to that.
Well, just leveraging the comment around augmented reality or virtual reality we were talking about earlier. So the Google Glass concept kind of just fell on the back end. It didn't really come to the fore, the idea of wearing a glass kind of device that sat just in front of your eye that then augmented your environment, provided information. And I think that comes back to the points that we've sort of been discussing and touching on as the themes or the areas in which the technology is being applied. So the areas that are driving all of this is, say, advancements in health, manufacturing, sports science, military applications, manufacturing. They're kind of like driving and pushing all the innovation. But then the affordability and accessibility and opportunities for people to be able to access it and build, say, their own 3D printer at home or other digital devices is really shifting. So it's about trying to find that kind of happy medium between things like Google Glass that didn't work on a mass sense, but it's still being explored and being applied, but in niche areas. So there's kind of like this really broad spectrum. I don't know if Ben wants to talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, normally those sorts of technologies start off in the entertainment space. I mean, actually, can I just get everyone to wave? Be on Snapchat? That'd be good. Thank you, because if it didn't happen on Twitty Snapface, it didn't happen at all. So, but these types of things, that's where it starts. This has got a camera, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, batteries, and all the rest, okay? And now you're internet famous, maybe. But with Google Glass and the latest iteration of Google Glass, it's being fundamentally used, to your point, in manufacturing. You know, and you can walk around looking like an idiot, and nobody cares. Whereas if you walk around with Google Glass, you're a glass hole. You know, that just happened. But
that's interesting. We saw it as an invasion of privacy.
We did, yeah, absolutely right. But in a workplace, that's different. You know, it's just part of your daily work, and you can be better at your job by using these sorts of assistive technologies, be it visual or actually augmenting yourself with a thing that makes you lift heavy things or whatever. So that I think the conversation needs to change in the media, to be honest, because the media is always going on about entertainment, whereas the conversation is precisely where it's just not fun. Yep. It's just not fun to talk about that.
How does the media need to change its conversation, and when it comes to people having access to these sorts of technologies?
Oh, I think the conversation is changing. I think the influence of consumers, the power in numbers of consumers, older people are getting more and more tuned with technology, and they're more consumers of things. And so developers and technicians and designers are really trying to listen and to tailor to the market. I chair the Queensland government-funded Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, and we've got 2,000 providers of care, researchers, developers, really coming together and trying to solve some of those issues. And the media is very interested in that. And I guess programs like the National Disability Insurance Scheme, where assistive technology for the first time in our country will be funded to a level that we've never seen before. The advances in innovation in aged care are seeing many more developers going to market, being commercialised and making some real advances, and I think the media is picking up on that. Certainly, I've never played too many games in my life, but I can see the application of gaming in the workforce, for example, in our workforce, but across a number of things, and I think just the tailoring and personalisation of technology is winning out.
Let's talk about biohacking. How many people still have privacy concerns about what they put on the internet, what they share about themselves, what others might share? Still a concern for you? Security, you know, the old pay wave that we all use now. Do you worry that people are able to, you know, hack into things more easily because of that sort of thing as well? We're not so worried about pay wave. Nah, she's all good there. Ben, of course, you microchipped yourself because you wanted to be first. Yeah. Good on you. Where is it?
So it's in my hand.
Yep.
And the only reason I did it was because I wanted to give it a crack at the end of the day.
Yep.
Just something to do.
What's on your microchip?
At the moment, my microchip works to let me in the house. So much like you go into an office and wave your card or whatever on the door, that lets me in the house. And it's got some Bitcoin information on there. So there's that's sitting in there, so that's pretty close to me.
Absolutely, because it's worth a cracker amount at the moment.
It is, yes. Well, actually, someone said...
I might be hacking in that.
Someone said you're scared of being hacked, and I was more concerned about being hacked off rather than hacked. But, yeah, it's fun at the end of the day. It's fun.
Okay. Dietmar, is that something you do? Would you microchip yourself?
Go on.
No.
What are your concerns about that?
Pretty specific.
Yeah. Why not?
I mean, the question would be, you know, why? You know, I mean...
Why not?
Yeah. You have some motivation to do that, right? Because you want to be first. But that would be not something, you know, as an engineer, I would look for the practical use for it, right? I wouldn't be against that my data are shared, right? At the same time, you know, it was quite amazing how many hands went up, which I understand. But I think, you know, one of the important issues is that we develop the policies and the regulatory framework that you are not concerned anymore, right, in that respect. Because I would think also that 100% of the people in the room, you don't have to be afraid about your data, right? There's only a very small percentage of people who should be afraid about that their data set is shared, right? But these people determine that all of you are afraid. And a lot of the things which come from the media, how your data can be misused, I think can be regulated and can be policed via very good policies, right? And on the other hand, you also should face the reality, which again comes to, I think, the regulatory side and the policy side. I don't know how many of you watched SBS last night, where they had a documentary about Facebook. And you know, and you will be surprised how much data of yourself is already up in the cloud, right? Which is, again, a reality. So I think the important aspect is not to hold back on this technology, but to put the right regulatory framework and policy into place.
With that chip, not just the chip, let's talk about wearable tech that might be something to do in your body, something to regulate your heartbeat, whatever it might be, major organs, for example, when it all develops further in the future. If somebody can hack to get my credit card details, one of my concerns with this would be, well, what's to stop someone from hacking the medical group that have developed all these bits and pieces that go into us and hacking them to stop them, to quicken them to do whatever they want to do, to strike fear?
There was a situation recently where a specific set of pacemakers needed a firmware upgrade because of the ability. They could have been hacked essentially. So that in my mind opened up the discussion. Okay, if you've got a manufacturer who's making pacemakers that could be hacked and you need to go to the doctor and have a firmware upgrade, what happens if that company goes out of business? You know, that's a legitimate concern. Suddenly you'll have something in you which regulates life. You know, does it become Windows 7 all of a sudden? And you know,
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that inside them. No. I don't know.
Beck?
But that's where building off the prior question around data and privacy does come into play, and it is important for that exact reason, because it's about who owns that information, who has access to it, and therefore what do they have access to about you. So I think it is really important to push back as consumers onto industries, onto brands, onto others who are creating these technologies that we're either adding to our phones, watches, or other devices and things that we're wearing, to push back onto them to request transparency of understanding of what is happening with that data, where is it going, where is it being stored, where is it being located, is it in the cloud, and if so, which cloud? Is it hovering over Australia and therefore within the bounds of our laws and regulation, or is it in some cloud, which isn't technically a cloud, just to be clear. There are actually giant server farms out there that hold all of this data, and they require a lot of energy, obviously, to drive them, and some of them now are going onto boats out to sea, all sorts of different things. It is highly complex and complicated, so I think it's it was good, from my opinion at least, to see that many hands go up, but also it's excellent to be having conversations such as this, because I think that's the first step, is opening up that dialogue and discourse and getting everyone discussing these issues.
But most people don't care, surely. Like, there's a lackadaisical approach to privacy when it comes to Facebook.
But it's also more about your data is worth something. So at the moment, big business is making a lot of money off us and off what we're doing, whether it's taking steps, following a map, understanding what's going on. We're sharing things, and then we're not getting anything kind of reciprocally for that other than convenience or ease of use.
Deepna, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, but again, I think that's a completely different argument, right? This is not about keeping your privacy. This is that companies like Facebook makes its profits, and the question is, how much do they give back to society? I think we have to stick to the argument, what we look at, and I fully agree. Companies like Facebook, Zuckerberg now has a foundation, right, because he's under so much pressure. But that's not good enough. I think that's, again, where the regulatory side and the policy side comes into place, that, even so we have an economy, but it can't be that companies like this make the profits, they don't share it in certain countries because they want to save tax and so on.
And do you see that these concerns as something that might stop people from taking up technology that could help their lives?
I think they're stopping people now. I think Dita's comments about privacy and regulation around that and standards. I'm doing a lot of work internationally with countries like Japan, where technology's advancing at the rate and being applied, like robotics in aged care, before standards, international standards and protocols are around those use. But I think also on the flip side of it, privacy is often used as a excuse not to do something. And when you delve into it, the privacy is actually well protected in those projects, but is perhaps seen by a few not to be. And so I think we need to have a conversation at the start of deploying technology about privacy, but it has to be realistic. We are living in a world of digital devices around us. Privacy is a big issue, but it's a controllable issue through policy and regulation done properly and done worldwide. I think that's the other thing. It can't be dictated in this country. It is a global issue, and we should be working on some of those global impact issues.
Hands up if you would use technology, be it wearable, internal, whatever, that would make you faster, smarter, more attractive. Oh, the hands have gone up on more attractive. Like, yeah, we'll take that. Do we have that, Beck Davis? Are those things available to us?
Yeah, I think that's a big push for all things wearable. You see it across a number of different sectors that we've spoken about tonight, whether it's health or sports science or military applications. The push is to try and augment ourselves to be better. But I also think that is another big question mark, and another thing that we need to consider moving forward is the ideas of constantly trying to almost remove our notion of humanness, the elements that distinguish us, that make us unique. Why is it always constantly seen as a flaw that needs to be improved? So we need to be careful when we're engaging with technology that we're not constantly trying to highlight or flag or look at deficiencies in our sense of self and see these opportunities as what they are, so that people have a clear understanding and then can kind of negotiate how they will and won't necessarily respond or react to that.
Right, so when I use that same filter that softens around the edges every time, is that just a precursor to what could be possible?
Is
You know,
that, sorry? What was
that glow of the skin that you have forever, until the day you die, you look 25.
Yeah, well, I think that's a big draw card for wearables, is that idea that you could have, whether it's clothing or devices or things that help to protect you from the sun or from other elements that may augment and start to shift and shape and change, or whatever it might be. I think it's that idea of trying to enjoy life a lot more. So the inclusivity component and aged care and other areas I think is critical, and that's where technology can be amazing to make society more accessible and more open and attainable for everyone. But then what is happening with that benchmark and the idea of homogeneity and everyone going for all the same thing all the time and us all becoming one. Yep. So, yeah.
Can I just make a point, sorry, about self-augmentation? So when I got my microchip 4 years ago, I went to a website called dangerousthings.com, paid $100, it was shipped over within a couple of weeks. I went to a peer assist and I was injected with a microchip. That was 4 years ago. I had quite a large discussion with one of Australia's top surgeons, and he said, how dare you do that? How dare you put yourself at risk with the taxpayers' money in case you got an infection and all the rest. And my argument was, people are going to do it. We live in a world now where that is accessible. That kind of augmentation. You're going to see YouTube videos where kids are slicing themselves up and injecting things. It happens all the time. You know, and I think forums like this where we can have the discussion is really important. But there's only so much that policy and procedure and protection that we give our citizens is going to come across. We are living in the world of Blade Runner right now. You know, we are, and it's only going to get better, not worse, better.
More attractive is one thing, but what about smarter? Because I love that scene in The Matrix where they say, do you know how to fly a helicopter, whatever sort of helicopter it is? And Trinity says, nope, but we can do that. Well, that's paraphrasing what she says. And they just upload it into her brain, how to fly this helicopter. And she can do it 3 seconds later. Now, I don't want to fly helicopters, but we would all, I would love to go to Italy and speak Italian. And for that to be somehow uploaded, like I don't want to do any work, I just want to speak Italian. Are we far away from that? Like, who doesn't have that thing they'd really love to know how to do?
But you can do that now with the Google headphones. So you can talk in real time and have it translated in real time.
I want to translate.
You want to talk it? Okay,
I
sorry.
think more of what you're referring to, it's the term that's used around that is called the singularity, and the idea of kind of human-machine synthesis. And there's all sorts of speculation about what point we're going to reach that. 2047 and 2045. There's all sorts of different dates that kind of get thrown around, but it all comes back to this idea that at some point we're going to kind of merge with machines beyond the chip to these points of being able to maybe say download. So that's not far off, and so that needs to be something, if we are going to create kind of independent means of managing this information or protecting citizens or others, or ensuring that there's some sort of group that oversees it. What is that? What does it look like? And what does it mean? Do we just head down that path?
It'll be Elon Musk. He'll be in control.
Well, that's it, you know.
But do we want to become machines? As much as I want the information, am I willing to give up my 100% humanity, you know what I mean, to do that?
Yeah, that was...
Can I just step in here?
Please.
You know, when you say it's just around the corner, that's not a realistic time frame. Yeah, we understand maybe 3% of the brain from the science point of view, from the biology, right? I give you 2 examples. So I'm also sitting on the Australian Research Council. So we have to evaluate centers of excellence. And Australia is absolutely leading in the bionic eye. And again, some of you might have seen reports about this, right? Again, this is research for more than 20 years. But the reality is, with the chips, with the hardware, the software, the material sciences, which is absolutely amazing, what the patient can see is flickering of a little bit of light, right? And now you're telling me in 20 years, I get a microchip and then I speak Italian and Spanish? That's not the reality. And coming back to my area, where I had colleagues 20 years ago who promised by today, and you used that term, which I would like to correct, that we 3D print tissues and organs, right? And he said, and he got $50 million, not in Australia, this was in the States, that by today we would have the tissue-engineered heart. And we are not even able to engineer heart muscle. So again, when it comes back to the term, we 3D print tissues and organs, what I did try to explain, we 3D print what we call scaffolds. This is the physical piece. This is just one piece of the puzzle of a very complex treatment for the patient. And I just gave a talk a couple of weeks back at a conference, and my title was Bioprintonomics. Can we really print tissue and organs, or did we forget biology? Right? So this is a very important part. And again, we can do the best implant. If that leads into the hand of a bad surgeon, there will be a bad outcome. We can have the best implant if you are a highly compromised patient, where you have issues because of your cardiovascular systems, maybe because of smoking, or if you have diabetes and so on. Everything becomes more complex. And therefore, again, I think you have to wait much, much longer and offer also your offsprings with a chip which will allow you to speak Italian.
Darn.
Just
I'll have to go with the Google Translate instead.
Yeah, just clarify, it's not my
Go with
prediction.
Ben.
That's not my prediction, but that's like the well-known kind of information that's out there, and at some point we're on that trajectory. So irrespective at what point it is going to occur, there's a trajectory toward that, or a desire, at least in society, to push toward that.
What would this mean? By the way, what did you all think of the shin bone that's going around? Pretty impressive? Well, there you go. Had you ever contemplated that might be available to you one day? Yeah. We may as well start questions. Go ahead.
I was just curious, what level of complexity of that is the shin bone? Because I believe there's said to be 7 levels of complexity, and like I think we're at currently level 2 or 3.
Okay, we just asked about the levels of complexity when it comes to this sort of printing.
Yeah, so maybe I can give you the sequence how we did it, right? So again, it started obviously out with the patient coming into the hospital. Then we had the high-tech imaging, right? Then we had the discussions. Then we took this digital data. We have commercial softwares which allow us to manipulate this. Actually, one of my PhD students, Sebastian, which you did see at the beginning at the machine, he was heavily involved. So I had a PhD student and postdocs modeling for 1 week. For 1 week. And they know the software in and out. I understand maybe 5 or 10% of that software, right? So Sebastian had a training, a master's in engineering to understand this software, right? And the same as my postdocs. Then we did some modeling. Then we did send those files to the printer. Then we discussed, how we are going to print it with Peter, because there is a question which directions, which materials, and so on. Then we had our models. Then we asked the surgeon to come in. Then we had a discussion with the surgeon, showing him the models and so on. Then we discussed how the scaffold could look like. Then we designed the scaffold, which took another 3 or 4 days. Then we printed the scaffolds, 4 different versions, asked the surgeon to come in again. Surgeon with us worked around the model with the scaffold. We did iterations, changed again, came out with 2 new prototypes, asked the surgeon to come again, and then we had the final design. That is the complexity, right? And I could list in each of this field another 10 complexities, right? So again, that's not something which you can do, we also have to say, in large scale. And that comes about the argument. Luckily, not many patients have this large defect, right? But it would be absolutely impossible, first from the technology side, because we wouldn't have the manpower and so on, but also from the costs to treat 1 million people with a defect like this, right? But then the reality is, again, we did a spin-off company in Singapore, and for the small defects, 10,000 of patients have been treated. because these are standardized products and so on. So that is the complexity involved.
If you have a question, can you just make your way to the microphones at the side, and if you're unable to get there,
Well, I
tell us.
should mention one more
Up to
thing.
you.
I was in surgery with the surgeon 12 hours, but the entire surgery took 16 hours.
Wow. So if you have a question, if you can just make your way to either side, and then we'll. And for anybody, as I mentioned, who cannot make it to the side, just put your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. Hi.
Thanks for the panel, and it's been terrific to see the difference in views between people of different age and different backgrounds. My question's to you, Ben. You sit there listening to Professor talk about the traditional decision-making framework. You chipped yourself because you could. It's said we're now at a time where the pace of change is slower than it will ever be. Dubai's just appointed a Minister for Artificial Intelligence.
Yep.
Are we at a stage where the traditional framework for change in lots of things, including medicine, are about to be disrupted significantly because there are individuals who have more wealth than governments, and the truism still holds, follow the money?
Look, I think you're right. I think probably the bigger answer to that question is that there's a massive micro ability for change. You know, we've never been in a greater position as a consumer or as a citizen to actually try something and do something and achieve and break and fix and mould and all the rest. So yes, big business, big government, there's a huge amount going on that we will learn about over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And Dubai is an amazing example of that. But on that micro scale, that's where I think the true excitement is. The ability for people to be able to change in a tiny little way, and for that knowledge to be just broadcast, and for someone to take that little bit of iteration and then do a greater thing. That is exciting. Just a single YouTube video of someone doing something infinitesimally small and making a change to a global change is what's truly exciting. So yeah, it's really, really exciting. Sorry. Thank you for your question.
Yes.
Hello, this is probably an open question to the panel. You talked earlier about educating our younger children and people in order to go out and take advantage of things like 3D printing and that sort of thing. I guess my question is, where is the industries in Australia? How is Australia going to take advantage of this? And the reason why I ask that is we talk about automotive and aerospace. We have no automotive industry. We have no aerospace industry. The reality of it is that at the current state of technology, 3D printing is really only good for high value added, low volume products, not good for mass manufacturing. I agree with you in terms of educating our young folk. In fact, I encourage my daughter to complete a Bachelor of Visual Arts, majoring in 3D design, so she's one of our early adopters of this. But when you look at the companies that are involved in this, they don't have the education themselves to understand what this product can do for them, or they're a bunch of, sorry to say, artists who aren't going to change the national economy, and I'm part of that group as well. So I'm curious as where to see, and just for a bit of background for me, I'm a senior research fellow with an emerging technology group at one of Australia's major manufacturers, and I used 3D printing 20 years ago to do one of the first rapid prototyping concepts in Australia. So I'm just curious to see where you see Australia's growing industry is to utilise some of this technology that we're talking about, and how do we educate the industry to take this on?
Okay, maybe I take this question. So when you say we don't have an automotive industry, I'm working at the moment on another training center grant, and one of the industry partners, quotation mark, is the Queensland Automation Association. You know how many members they have?
No.
16,000.
How much are they returning to the economy rather than just being an
Well,
organisation?
this is, I think it's like $600 or $700 million.
Yeah.
Right. So there is an industry, right? So when you look now into automotive, of course, the BMWs, the Mercedes, and so on, they are using this technology in their design centers, as you do now, and we have now also functional prototypes. But what we are discussing now with this association is that obviously the market there is spare parts. And this is massive, right? So out of the 16,000 businesses, more than 80% have a size of 5 to 20 employees, right? So if you now develop an educational program that they can implement the 3D printing in their business with spare parts and so on, then you have an economy, right? So this is the direction we are going. When you talk about, that's also where I get very passionate, about this artist starting to print something. I know a number of artists, and the things they do are absolutely high-tech. And they are actually, we only read about the artists which sell the paintings or the other artwork for a very significant amount of money. But there is an industry out there are a lot of artists, which are not working on the scale, but which do amazing things. So the 3D printing technology, if they have the know-how how to use it, will also, I think, be an economical factor. So that's another direction. The other industry we are also looking into is, of course, the medical one, right? And again, the issue is, and I just mentioned this, there is this discussion about 3D printing in the hospital, right? But the complexity, as I described, is too big for a doctor to spend this time to go through this chain. So there are now a number of companies out there which charge a lot of money for their service. So one of the concepts, again, we will have in our training center, that we develop now a software which is targeted just for the surgeon, which is simplified, that with a few clicks, he can design the things he needs, right? So this is where I would say that when you talk to your sons and daughters, to your grandchildren at one day, that's the technology where you should go and where Australia can be competitive. And the last thing, of course, is what you mentioned, and again, you used 3D printing 20 years ago, and when you see how far 3D printing has come, again, we have to develop these technologies in a stage that our mature age group, again, that they can learn this quickly. And again, there is a big difference between Sebastian, who has a master's, who had like 24/7 software and so on development in his studies, that we again develop a very targeted educational program that our mature workforce, also in your company, that they learn how 3D printing can be used very quickly.
Cool, thank you. It's
Beck
exciting
Davis, did you want to
times.
add something?
Yeah, just building on that, I think it comes back to Anne's point earlier around the digital divide, and as mentioned here. So it's about how do we go about ensuring that gets closed for those that want it to be closed, and how do we ensure that our students or future graduates have that capacity to not just respond and see technology as this awe-inspiring thing that they want to kind of just feed into, but they have the capacity to help kind of co-create or design or influence what those end solutions are. So combining art with technology, or these ensuring our future graduates have the creative capacities to think beyond, I think is really key. So it's about ensuring that it covers all of that, and I think that Anne was pointing to that earlier around that digital divide.
Yeah, and I guess I supervise a lot of students across a lot of courses, and I'm gobsmacked as that even courses today, say in allied health, aren't concentrating on the range of technologies that can help you be better at your practice, be more efficient, but also help your customer or your client have a better experience. And Falls would be one example where a lot of allied health students do not know the range of technologies available on the market today, readily shelf technologies that make a big difference to people avoiding a fall, getting the proper response when they do have a fall, or recovering better. And so we have to do more now. So I think it's almost too, we're too slow at doing that. We need more to do more now in bringing to the attention the opportunities. But I guess on an economic equation, I work with many other countries and one particular state in Australia who's really looking at aged care for the next version of their manufacturing area and investing where there might be a downturn in the vehicle industry, looking at the opportunities that hold in issues of developing smart technologies for ageing populations. And there are many examples across the world where governments are embracing that as an economic solution. And I'd encourage that to be explored.
Might go here and then over there.
Hi everyone. I just wanted to see what you think about developing countries as well, and how this, exciting technology in Oz. It's great that we're moving ahead and developing everything. But what about developing or poor countries who don't have the same opportunities? Like, how do you see the future, and how can we take them with us? I guess on this journey.
Could I answer that one? I've just been in India recently, and I met with Vodafone, one of the people at Vodafone over there, and I happened to mention the fact that I was impressed that there was 1.4 billion phone connections over in India out of the 1.3 billion people that are there. And this chap looked at me and said, well, you know that there's only 400 million smartphones, though. Which to him was a very small number. Now, India is a prime example of is flying under everyone's radar. The changes to the demonetisation that went on a couple of years ago, the fact that pretty much every Indian has a bank account, or if you want to access government services, it's biometrics. It's incredible. The fact that the whole monetary system has changed. You pay using your mobile phone. You buy a 2-cent apple or a $5 taxi ride. So there are things happening in these, not developing nations, but those sorts of nations where you would imagine the bridge between the rich and the poor is quite vast. They're not. And it's changing all the time. Just the Pacific nations. The fact that biscuit sellers are losing money because people are spending more money on topping up their mobile phones, rather than spending money on chips and biscuits. I find it absolutely fascinating and incredible.
But I think it's a really important point, and it comes back to even looking at the idea around the one laptop per child. Like that whole concept completely fell over by the simple fact that they were unable to use the power in those regions was so unstable. They were unable to get connected in order to do the firmware or software upgrades. And so as a result, this concept that had this kind of utopian ideal of ensuring all these children in these developing nations had access to a laptop kind of just became defunct because they hadn't thought through the complexity of the system of engaging, connecting with power and technology and understanding what needs to exist as an infrastructure on an infrastructural level. So I think that's a really important and valid part of what we need to include in our conversation. Comes back to the digital divide. It's not just an age thing, it's a geographical question. And if we're talking about being connected, how do we ensure that we're including everyone as we move forward? Otherwise that divide is going to get bigger and greater, and there's going to be more kind of issues.
And we've really got to address it strategically. I think it's the divide doesn't get enough discussion. And we need to have that discussion more robustly.
But Zuckerberg got into trouble when he was trying to beam, the internet to a whole lot of African nations and all the rest, because it was seen as being a commercial play. Now, I look at that and go, good on you, but someone's got to pay for it at the end of the day. And if Zuckerberg puts his hand up and says, I'm going to pay for it, then good on you, mate.
But then should he be the one determining how the systems and the system functions in that region? I think that comes back to those questions around what does that community want, what works for them, and how can they then get access to either the technology or the information to understand how this might be of use to them, and do they wish to be a part of it? Sherry Turkle makes reference to that idea of alone together, which is what you mentioned earlier, that on one hand we're considered highly hyper-connected, but then on the other we're completely not. So, and not just metaphorically, but physically as well.
If we wait for government to sort it out, and we're waiting forever.
We're nearly out of time. I talked to parents from remote schools about a year ago, and they were telling me about internet bills around $900 a month. So
satellite connections, expensive.
Yeah, they really are. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Hi panel, I'd like to thank you for your experience and sharing that with us tonight. I have a question that has twofold with regards to your application, Ben, on falling. I'm wondering whether that could actually tie into some sort of airbag for a person that's actually falling and would actually save them certainly either knocking their head or hurting. Secondly, a VR application for dementia patients that, that there's actually communities out there that actually built communities, physical communities that have made them more calm because they're actually used to the area and so forth. And so VR would actually be a slightly cheaper option. So I'm just curious about those 2 points.
Collaboration, co-design and co-creation in this room all at once.
Yeah. Well, the airbag, there is a company that is developing that at the moment. And it's a bit cumbersome, but it sets itself off when you land. The thing that we've found is, when we talk about fall prevention, is that the people who have been wearing our software on their watches have actually been more active, and by being more active, are reducing the amount of falls because they feel safer. It sounds weird, they're taking more risks. Because there is this safety net, it's perceptual, but it's a safety net. And that's something we didn't anticipate at all. So there are amazing things happening in fall detection and fall prevention, and amazing things, like you say, happening in VR. I find it absolutely incredible, and good on World for doing good things. It's brilliant, so thank you for your question.
Interesting though that there was some laughter around. He was like, "Yeah, I'm not wearing that." Weren't you? Like, airbag? No. So it not only has to be wearable, but people have to kind of like the idea of it too.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, that's why, again, not to go on about the watch all the time, but it's a fashion item, as opposed to an airbag on the butt. Not so much a fashion item, but
I'm out of fashion.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you.
I'll be fast. This might be a bit of a naive question, but in terms of data security we were talking about before, and big companies making money off our data that would be probably generated anyway because we walk around and need to use maps. What ways do you guys suggest that big companies give back then? Because in my mind, and this might be incorrect, it always comes down to, profit sharing, they should share the cash, even though that's probably logistically impossible. And as soon as we find out that big companies are making money off of our big data that's pretty much irrelevant to us but useful to them, we forget the initial convenience of their product, like Google Maps. I just don't think it's... just your opinions.
Look, I think we are better off because of Facebook, fundamentally. We communicate more. It may be on a more distant scenario, but we always talk about the fact that, Facebook's taking my data and they know where I am and they know what I like and they send me ads and all the rest. But you've got a pretty bloody good product. And it is fundamentally helping us connect, and maybe not with my college mates that I don't really need to know what they're doing, whatever. But it is good. And if the price for that is losing some of your self and privacy, then if you don't want it, then don't be on Facey and Twitter.
But I think there's definitely opportunities in the future to try and understand that. If we can dataize or at least create metrics for all sorts of different things, we've got our quantified self, then, how do we go about monetizing that? And that might be part of the pushback in the future, people seeking out apps or things. There's already products that do exist that help to protect you from, say, pernicious activity that may collect or be storing data about you. There's all sorts of, whether it's an app or an actual phone, there's products out there. But I think that's definitely one avenue in the future of society pushing back and saying, well, hold on a sec, this is actually worth something, it means something to me, it's of value, you're benefiting from it, how might I be part of that exchange, and if I opt in, what do I get for that? Not just guidance of how to arrive at my end destination, but what else am I getting from that? Because they are selling your data to third-party companies and other individuals, so it's about just understanding the full complexity of that. Because as you create something else has been impacted or destroyed as a consequence of that. So we just need to think through, we create this new thing, what else? What are the ripple effects of that?
Well, thank you so much for being here this evening for our final session of the Digital Futures series. Tonight has been amazing. I'd like to thank our panellists so much. Can you please put your hands together for Anne Livingston, Dietmar Humacher, Ben Slater and Beck Davis. We will have another fantastic series for you next year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the State Library of Queensland organise for you. I will be replaying this conversation on Monday afternoon between 1 and 2. So if you'd like to tell your friends to be listening to ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland, that would be brilliant. Thank you once again. My name's Kelly Higgins-Devine. You've been great.